You can't hold me down. 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 You can't hold me down.
I want to make a video talking about when, as a management or landlord, you should use local authorities such as the police or sheriff when you're having problems or disputes with your tenants, like mostly tenants with tenants, more like noise disturbances, stuff like that. I'm going to talk about the reason why I like to use them and the reason sometimes you have to use them. A lot of times it's hard to do the self-help stuff when you're dealing with this kind of things because the law actually, for example, doesn't let you do any strong enforcement on your tenants. So a lot of times, even if you don't want to, you have to use the local authorities. But I want to talk about like a noise complaint. So what happens is when, let's say you have a fourplex and there's one unit that is getting called on a lot, you're getting called on a lot about them being loud. Normally what you're going to do as a landlord or management, you're going to check on that unit. So when they call, you're going to go immediately over there and see if you can see if they're being loud. What happens is sometimes you're going to get over there and it's not going to be loud, for example, or they see you pull in and they're going to turn music off. I've had this stuff happen. And then they're pretty much going to deny it. And then they're also going to turn around and say that it's them that's always being loud and they're having this. And so now you're going to be there and you're not really going to have much you can really do. And or let's say you do show up and you obviously see that they are loud and you give them a notice to turn it down. A lot of times tenants seem to really take your notices and warnings, they kind of just brush it off, and like within a few days or a week, they're going to be right back doing to whatever you've told them not to. It just happens, so it's really hard to enforce this kind of stuff. And I know this isn't with all tenants, but if you're a management or a landlord dealing with tenants, you're going to have this happen a lot, where you're going to have a lot of tenants still just kind of blow that warning off, and now now what do you do? So now, I mean, you could say, hey, we're going to get another notice. We're going to charge you, let's say, $20 for enforcing it, or we may start an eviction process to get you out of there. Well, what happens to this is, let's say you actually do give them a fee for being loud. Well, what happens if they decide not to pay it? Are you going to evict them for not paying rent now, saying that when they paid rent that they paid that fees and now they owe rent? Or are you just not going to accept it unless you get the full amount? So now what happens is that you're going to go to court, and if they choose not to pay it, now there's going to be a conflict because they're going to say they paid rent. So now the conflict is on, can you charge them that fee or not? And that's going to be, the judge is probably going to rule in their favor, believe it or not. And you know, it can be, when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, it's just stuff that, why even do that when you can just go ahead and have the police department do it? So, but if you're in that situation, if there's a lease, they're definitely probably going to go with the tenants. If you're outside the lease, what happens is now you pretty much gave them a 30-day notice, hopefully, and if the 3-day notice might be in conflict, so they're probably not going to evict them in 3 days, but they're going to go ahead and turn around and give them that 30 days, because since they're locked into a lease, now you can get them out in 30 days. So that might happen. So remember that if you are doing it this way. But what I like to do is, after I go over there and I handle it my first time, I try, the first notice is saying, hey, you guys are having a complaint or whatever is going on. I give them that notice. Then it's the ones after that. I don't want to keep on wasting my time going over there. There's not much I can do. It's not documented. Me going to court and saying that they're being loud, or the tenants keep on calling and being loud, the courts aren't going to take that as proof. So when you have them call the police are going to go over there, and then they're going to handle the situation. If it's not being loud, they're just going to give them a warning saying they've had calls, and then if it happens again, they're going to come over, and again, if they're being loud or not being loud, probably nothing's going to happen. They're just going to get another warning until they actually are loud. If they are loud, then they're going to get a fine, and now they're going to be going and handling it with the police department and at the sheriff or at the courthouse, instead of directing their anger and frustration on you for making them, turn down their music or telling them they can't do it. Now it's going to be resulting out of somewhere else. And a lot of people are going to be, well, now you're going to get the tenants in conflict. Well, even with them calling you, it's the same thing. The tenant that's being told not to do something, they know that one of the other neighbors has let them know who's doing it. So that doesn't stop anything, but at least now it's handled professionally by a authority power that has the power to enforce those fees and fines. And now if it keeps on becoming a problem, and for some reason that they're not maybe getting fines and stuff, at least now you also have it documented on record of the police records that they're there. The problem with the police records, though, is they do charge for those if you wanted to take them to court, and it's not all one list. So, for example, if they went over there on a Monday, they're going to have it documented, and then they went over there on a Wednesday, it's documented, and then on a Friday, it's documented. You have to pay for each one of those. It's not all on a list. So they can get kind of expensive. I think right now in our area it's $3. So if there's 3 on that record, you're going to be paying $9 just to have those statements. So it could add up. So hopefully this helps. And if you guys are having problems with a lot of tenants in a building, don't be discouraged on having the local authorities handle this stuff. That's what they're there for. That's what those local ordinances are for, is to handle tenants disputes where you're not stepping in. They have local ordinances. It's just like living in a house and your neighbor is being loud. You're gonna call the police if they're over there shooting off bottle rockets, fireworks. It's no reason to call your landlord. I don't call my landlords over that. If I see my neighbor doing something wrong, I'm calling the police. Like, I might warn my landlord about it, but that's what I tell my tenants to do. So a lot of times you also are going to get calls that there's like nothing you as a landlord or manager can do or enforce. For example, I've had several times where I've had tenants or neighbors in the same building, and they're friends, and they have a fallout, something happens, and now they're like calling you about the other person, or maybe one stole from them. They call me up like, hey, apartment C guy stole all my stuff, and it's like, it's like, that's something you need to call the cops on. Just like, I can't come over there and go into his apartment. I can't do any of that. That stuff is all going to be for the police to handle. And sometimes the last time I actually had this happen where people called me is because one tenant stole the other one's drugs, and they wanted me to step in and do something. And it's like, dude, you need to do something with that. Got to call the cops, and obviously they can't call the cops, so that's why they were more expecting me to do something. But I'm just telling you, if you get into the landlord stuff and you get several apartments, over time, you're gonna start getting a lot of calls, and some of it's just crazy stuff, and over time it's less and less that you want to deal with just little complaints, little stuff. If it's something small, handle it. If it gets to where it keeps happening and it's something that is a city ordinance, that's when you need to put some of those onto the city and let them handle it. They're going to do a lot better job, and they're going to be able to enforce it better, and usually tenants will start letting that enforcement happen. Most of them will stop doing what they're doing than if you actually are the one enforcing that stuff. When you start enforcing that stuff, sometimes tenants, they'll get pretty angry, and like you're the asshole landlord, and you don't have any right to do that to them, and like, it's really hard to deal with that. So it's over time, you're just going to want someone else to handle that. And mostly when there's ordinances and there's police and sheriffs that are actually there, that that's their job to handle that kind of stuff. It just push it on off. You have other stuff to handle, other things to deal with. So you need to. That's what I'm trying to say. I know when I made some comments about this, I got a lot of comments, but again, there are tenants that aren't dealing with this kind of stuff, and they're looking at this as a tenant point of view than a landlord point of view, and they were like, like, it's so bad that you're gonna call the police on a tenant and give them a fine or give them a criminal record. That's not my fault. I look at it as, if they're a tenant and they're messing up, I'm gonna give them a warning. If they keep on doing it, I'm already past the point where I'm gonna keep on coming over there and giving them a warning. You know, either if it gets bad enough, I want them out of the apartment, and it's probably not something that's that bad where I feel like I should be victim over it. So instead, I just rely on the police department, and they'll come in, give them a ticket, fine or warning, whatever they're going to do, and normally that will fix the problem, you know. So it's much easier that way than me trying to get involved, and the problem is taken out where it's like every week, you know, once or twice a week or every other week that you're getting calls and having to deal with it. When, you know, the cops get involved once or twice, you don't hear from the tenants about it anymore. So, well, I almost forgot. There's also been a lot of calls where I get neighbors calling about domestic, tenants fighting an apartment, being loud and hitting each other. Those are great examples on where many times you shouldn't get involved with that. You going over there isn't going to help the situation a lot of times, and you're really not in that position to be handling that. That's when I, as a landlord and manager, will call the police for them. I'll ask them to also call the police. But this is just another example on why you should also let the local authorities handle this kind of stuff, because yeah, you might want to go over there and still check on it, but you also want to have the authorities come in because there might be a bigger problem there. There might be someone actually physically getting hurt and other things happening. So you definitely want to treat everything all like the same and still let the police do their job. And I guess that's another big example I wanted to mention. Hopefully this helps you guys. See ya. Girl might want to see this.
He's gonna get his ass busted. You're gonna get your ass whooped.